Every country has a story that refuses to die. A mystery so deep that it becomes legend. For Scotland, one of its greatest is written not in ink but in stone and salt water. The legend is now 125 years old, anchored to the desolate island of Eilean Mor. The puzzle is as stark as the island itself. 3 lighthouse keepers, 1 isolated station, and the unexplained vanishing of all 3 men. Was it an almighty storm that claimed them? A sudden explosion of madness and violence? Or do the old island tales of sea monsters and ghosts hold a terrifying truth? Today, we'll attempt to separate the evidence from the legend and try to solve the unsolvable case of the Eilean Mor Lighthouse keepers. This is Midnight Metro Mysteries, where we take a step into the unknown on the last train home. So please, present your ticket and come aboard the last train to the world's darkest stories. Flannan Isles Lighthouse on Eilean Mor was constructed in 1899. Appointed to the lighthouse were 3 men occupying 3 different positions. The first was James Ducat, the principal keeper. Ducat was the most senior man on the island. A seasoned veteran with 21 years in the lighthouse service, he was known for being a reliable, experienced and conscientious keeper. The second man was named Thomas Marshall. His role was the assistant keeper. An earlier incident in his career led him to being fined for losing equipment in a storm, potentially making him overly cautious about securing supplies. The third man, whose name was Donald MacArthur, fulfilled the role of the relief keeper. Whilst not a permanent fixture at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, his role was to fill in for the permanent first assistant William Ross, who was away on sick leave at the time of the disappearance. Some accounts suggest he had a reputation for being quick-tempered and potentially violent. 15th of December, 1900. In the stormy waters of the Outer Hebrides, the cargo steamer SS Arcta made its way past the island of Eilean Mor. As they passed, the vessel's captain noticed something deeply unsettling. The lighthouse was dark. He recorded the outage in the ship's log, and when the Arcta docked in Edinburgh 3 days later, this report was immediately forwarded to the Northern Lighthouse Board. The island's relief vessel, the Hesperus, was dispatched to investigate. However, due to violent storms and treacherous seas, the vessel was prevented from sailing straight away. For days, the island remained cut off from the world. It wasn't until Boxing Day, December 26th, that the Hesperus finally dropped anchor at Eilean Mor. The discoveries that the crew would go on to make on that desolate rock would become one of the most baffling maritime mysteries of all time. A mystery that would inspire books, television shows, and even a major motion picture. This is what they found. The Hesperus arrived at Eilean Mor to an ominous silence. The warning signs were immediate. The flagpole was bare, the landing stage was empty, and most disturbingly, the 3 keepers were nowhere to be seen. Captain James Harvey blew the ship's whistle and ordered a signal flare to be fired, but the island remained silent and still. A lone relief keeper, Joseph Moore, was sent ashore to uncover the truth. Once Moore stepped foot inside the lighthouse, he discovered a place that looked frozen in time. The clocks had stopped, the fireplace was cold, the beds were unmade, and a half-eaten meal sat on the kitchen table. It was as if the occupants had simply vanished mid-bite. He returned to the ship to report his findings, and then, this time accompanied by 2 other sailors from the Hesperus, a more thorough search took place. The search of the entire island found no trace of the men, but the west landing revealed a scene of inexplicable violence. Thick iron railings were bent and twisted out of shape. A supply railway, bolted into solid rock, had been ripped from its foundation. In a final check inside the lighthouse, they found a critical clue. On the coat hooks, 2 sets of oilskin waterproofs were gone, but a third remained. This suggested one of the keepers had gone out into the unforgiving Atlantic weather without their protective gear. Captain Harvey had seen enough and sent a chilling telegram to the mainland.
A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall and MacArthur, have disappeared from the island. The clocks have stopped. The signs indicate that something must have happened about a week ago.
Joseph Moore and 3 volunteer seamen were left on the island to man the light, and the official investigation into the strange disappearance began. Now, before we jump into the theories of what happened to these 3 men, I would kindly ask you to give this video a quick like, and please join our late night detective crew by subscribing to this channel. What do you think happened to these men? Please let me know in the comments section. Thank you. Theory number 1. Murder-suicide. The first theory posits that one of the keepers went mad. Donald MacArthur, who was known for having a short fuse, may have lost his temper one final time. Did the monotonous tasks, the endless roar of the sea, the constant solitude break MacArthur's grip on reality? Maybe a simple disagreement escalated into catastrophic violence. Something as simple as Ducat and Marshall wearing their storm jackets inside, making the living quarters soaking wet. The mentally twisted MacArthur may have previously warned them about this, and this small action could have been the thing that sent him over the edge, disposing of their bodies in the churning waters of the sea below. Afterwards heading back into the lighthouse, sitting down to a meal, and once calm, realising his own horrifying actions. Unable to deal with the guilt, he headed back out into the storm, stood atop one of the island's many cliffs, and threw himself into the sea below. Though this theory is certainly possible, it does not explain the sheer amount of damage done to the island itself, though teamed with the next theory could explain things. Theory number 2. The rogue wave. It is thought that Ducat and Marshall were working on the western landing, tying up supplies in preparation for an incoming storm. MacArthur may have been inside the lighthouse eating his lunch. Ducat and Marshall, potentially with their backs to the sea, may have been completely focused on their task to notice the deteriorating conditions behind them. Marshall especially having previously been fined for losing gear in a storm. A huge wave began to materialise on the horizon. From the lighthouse, MacArthur may have seen the danger they were in. He sprinted away from the kitchen table and outside of the lighthouse. Forgetting his storm jacket, he shouted at them to move, but Ducat and Marshall, still with their backs to the sea, couldn't hear him over the storm. MacArthur would have had to run down to them, and once he reached them, it was already too late, and the mammoth wave crushes them and drags them out to sea. This would explain the immense amount of damage done to the island, but it doesn't necessarily explain what happened to the men. I believe a rogue wave did hit Eilean Mor, but it could have been days after the men disappeared. It does not necessarily mean that this wave was the cause of the men's disappearance. Theory number 3. Abduction. The third theory proposes that a gang of smugglers abducted the men, though at first glance this may seem far-fetched. When diving into the historical context of the Outer Hebrides, it becomes an eminently possible scenario. Eilean Mor's isolation made it a perfect unmonitored drop-off point for illegal trade. Between 1700 and 1900, the Outer Hebrides were rife with smuggling gangs. What if keepers Ducat and Marshall went down to the landing, not to prepare for an incoming storm, but because they saw a vessel arriving? Perhaps they initially thought it was the Hesperus, the relief ship, but much to their dismay, they were greeted not by relief, but by smugglers. The smugglers' vessel may have needed emergency repairs, forcing them to land on Eilean Mor. Maybe the smugglers attempted to bribe Ducat and Marshall, but due to Ducat's many years of exemplary service, this would have undoubtedly been turned down. The smugglers would have realised that their entire operation was fatally compromised. They could not afford witnesses. They subdued the 2 keepers at the landing and then hunted the third man, MacArthur, back to the lighthouse. Forced the keepers onto their boats, completed whatever emergency repairs they needed to take care of, and set sail out into the Atlantic. At this point, no matter what the 3 men would have said, their fate would only go one way: to the dank depths of the dark Atlantic Ocean. This would explain the biggest puzzle of all, the total elimination of bodies. Some of the devastating damage found at the landing could have been caused by the smugglers during the struggle, and a huge wave could have hit days or even weeks later, causing the rest of the damage. Though fantastical, this theory is certainly possible. Theory number 4, mercury poisoning. Whilst the smuggler abduction is a terrifying theory, it relies on an external threat. But what if the terror on Eilean Mor came from within? Theory number 4 asks what if the keepers were taken, not by criminals, but by an alarming invisible force lurking inside the lighthouse itself. The lighthouse was brand new, only built in 1899. It featured a technological breakthrough for the early 20th century. It had a huge rotating lens system, and in order to make this heavy assembly spin smoothly, engineers used an ingenious yet potentially deadly method: a bath of liquid mercury. Exposure to mercury, even in small amounts, can cause serious health problems, leading to extreme neurological and physiological symptoms. The lens sat suspended in this mercury, and even at the lighthouse's normal temperature, the toxic substance could have continuously released its invisible, odourless vapour. These vapours would have concentrated over weeks and months in the confined lamp room, silently attacking the keepers' nervous systems. This chronic, low-level exposure causes mercury poisoning, also famously known as Mad Hatter syndrome. Initially, the beginning stages of the condition would surely have been dismissed. The fatigue, the tremors, the irritability, all surely put down to the solitude and general strain of life on a remote island. The condition would have slowly worsened as the days and weeks ticked by, the insidious grip of the poison slowly rewiring their minds. Thoughts began to tangle, suspicions began to bloom, simple tasks would have become impossible. Then, once hallucinations started to take hold, unknown voices and visual horrors would have driven the keepers to a mental destruction. Logic would have been lost, replaced by fear and paranoia. This could have led to any number of situations taking place. Did one of the men snap and murder the others due to this paranoia, or even hallucinated voices telling them to kill? Did the men throw themselves into the sea, driven to it by the extreme terror on the island that was actually all just taking place inside their own heads? Could they have hallucinated to such an extent they simply fell into the sea, unable to recover themselves, or washed away into the Atlantic? This theory gains an extra layer of credibility when we look at the personnel change. Remember, MacArthur was only on Eilean Mor because the regular first assistant keeper William Ross was home on sick leave. This raises a crucial question. Was Ross's illness actually him being the first casualty of the mercury poisoning? Did he escape the island just as the initial stages of poisoning took hold, unknowingly leaving the other 3 men vulnerable to a full-blown chemical nightmare? Could it be the case that the lights went out, not because of a storm, but because the keepers' minds were poisoned by the lighthouse itself? Theory number 5, malevolent spirits. Theory number 5 takes a frankly huge step into the world of the paranormal. What if neither storms nor smugglers were responsible for the men's disappearance? What if the truth behind Eilean Mor's vanished keepers is far older, far more terrifying, and steeped in a darkness that predates the lighthouse itself? Centuries before the lighthouse stood on Eilean Mor, the island was a place of profound dread. Local fishermen and livestock farmers, who lived on neighbouring islands in the Outer Hebrides, would occasionally bring sheep to graze on the island. They all held a deep, unshakable fear of Eilean Mor. They called it the other country, a place touched by spirits, a gateway to something ancient and malevolent. These hardened men would never, under any circumstances, stay a single night on Eilean Mor, convinced that to do so would invite untold horror. At the heart of this fear lies the ruins of a 7th century stone chapel, the only other building on the island. Even into the 20th century, there were strict unspoken rules for those who dared set foot on Eilean Mor. Sailors and keepers knew to immediately remove their hats upon landing, They would perform a clockwise turn and offer a silent prayer of gratitude to the island for safe passage. Visitors to the island also held another key rule: never ever pray inside the ruined chapel itself, as this action was rumoured to release all kinds of malevolent spirits free on the island. But the new lighthouse brought in a new kind of man. Keepers who perhaps dismissed these old fears as mere folklore considered Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, stepping ashore to replace the ailing William Ross. MacArthur was known as a tough brawler, a man of blunt force, not quiet reverence. In his haste, or even in his dismissiveness, did he forget the ritual? Did he stride onto that ancient soil, hat firmly on his head, mocking the old ways? It is alleged that in Ducat's keeper's notes that a huge storm hit the island, though the validity of this claim is questioned. If the storm of all storms hit the island before their disappearance, did one of the keepers battle through the storm, down to the chapel, and pray for safe passage, unknowingly unlocking the dark spirits to run rampant on the island? Or does this theory work in tandem with one of the others? Did one of the keepers, potentially suffering with mercury poisoning, offer a prayer inside the walls of the forbidden chapel, pleading for the hallucinations to stop, inadvertently opening up something far, far darker? Theories range from these spirits mimicking the calls of drowning sailors, drawing the keepers down to the sea and then drowning them, to spirits simply leading them off the island to the other country, the world in which they inhabit. Though this theory is almost certainly speculation and folklore, it is rumoured that to this day, if you step foot on the island, you can hear the keepers whispering their own names in the wind. Theory number 6, the sea monster. Today's final and perhaps most out there theory suggests a large sea monster was responsible for the keeper's disappearance. Scotland is a land steeped in the mystery of massive undiscovered creatures, a tradition best known through the legend of Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. But what if the deep, dark Atlantic waters held a creature far larger and far more dangerous? Its presence would explain the sheer indiscriminate destruction found on the island. The bent and twisted island railings, the sections of railway track ripped from their foundations. What if this wasn't the work of a wave? This was the smashing, thrashing power of a giant monster. This tragedy could have all once again begun at the Western Landing. Ducat and Marshall, drawn by a guttural cry, they go to investigate, when at that moment a huge crushing tentacle breaches the water's surface, grabs one of them and drags them down to the depths of the sea. Perhaps MacArthur sees this from the lighthouse, sprints outside, leaving his untouched meal, straight past his oilskin jacket, to join the fight, the two remaining keepers fighting for their lives in a hopeless battle for survival. But the beast's crushing tentacle power was too much for the two men to take. The creature prevails. The three keepers are overpowered, their bodies pulled into the cold, crushing depths of the Atlantic. Though this theory does explain everything found by the crew who searched the island, it's almost certainly absolute bollocks. But who knows what lies in the depths of the Atlantic Sea? So those are the 6 main theories of what happened on Eilean Mor. The official theory is theory number 2, the rogue wave. But for me personally, I'm not so sure that that is the whole story. I think there are too many questions left unanswered. Stating that Ducat and Marshall were on the Western Landing and unaware of this huge wave, and MacArthur being in the lighthouse, how was he the one to see the wave first? I can understand if he was at the top of the lighthouse with glass panes all round. But if he was, why was there a meal on the table downstairs? And if he was downstairs eating, then surely the visibility would have been poor, as lighthouses do not tend to have huge windows on the lower decks. So let's say he was at the top of the lighthouse and he saw the wave coming. How would he have enough time to sprint down from the top of the lighthouse to the men down on the landing, in order for him to also be washed away as well? He would have had to see the wave out of the window, see Ducat and Marshall on the boat landing, sprint downstairs, possible multiple sets of stairs if he was at the top, open the door, shout, not be heard, sprint down towards the men, all in time to be washed away alongside Ducat and Marshall. How long would that have taken? 30 seconds? 45 seconds? A minute? Surely the wave would have crashed down by then. I'm personally not sure that that makes sense. I would love to think that spirits, ghosts and sea monsters exist. I personally love old legends and stories of the paranormal. However, the reality is that we cannot prove such things exist, so we surely must stay within the realm of the evidence. Though there's something very intriguing about the men being lured away to their deaths for not respecting the island's traditions, we simply cannot prove this. Now, personally, I believe a rogue wave did hit Eilean Mor. It is the most logical solution to the amount of damage done to the island. However, I am not convinced that this is what caused the men's disappearance. At least all of the men's disappearance. I think it could have been a combination of a few things. What if a rogue wave did hit Eilean Mor and was responsible for the demise of both Ducat and Marshall, but MacArthur survived? Teamed with mercury poisoning twisting his grip on reality, but he could have ended up committing suicide to silence the voices. Ultimately, we will never know. I believe that the tragic beauty of this mystery is that it cannot be solved, and maybe that's for the best. In my opinion, it is these stories and legends that make history interesting. The unknown is what binds us as truth-seeking humans, so maybe it is better for there to be things that we cannot categorically solve. In a modern world with cameras capturing so many events at source, maybe it is best for us to have mysteries that will withstand the test of time. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please let me know what your thoughts are on this mystery. I would love to hear your theories and your perspective on what's happened on Eilean Mor. If there are any other mysteries you would like to see this channel delve into, then please let me know in the comments section. This is only this channel's second video, so any feedback would be greatly received. If you would like to check out this channel's other video, there is a link on screen right now.